Hi, and welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Pastor Paul Steele from Bethlehem Church in Austin, Minnesota. Now, The Bottom Line is our weekly summary of the previous Sunday's sermon. And right now, we're in a sermon series looking at the book of Proverbs as we examine a few of Solomon's Proverbs. Now, a proverb is a short, memorable sentence designed to give guidance to people's lives. And as God's people, we need guidance. In other words, we need wisdom. Wisdom is the godly knowledge for living life well. You and I were created to live within God's world. And for us to live well within God's world, then we need to follow His instructions, His guidance. And that is what Proverbs is about. Proverbs is offering us guidance to live well within God's world. And so our bottom line from Sunday is this: God's people live with wisdom when we follow God's way of life. God's people live with wisdom when we follow God's way of life. So how do we do that? How do we follow God's way of life? Well, first of all, we need to fear God. And to fear God shows up in our life by trusting God. Are we trusting His word? Are we trusting His promises? Are we following His commands? Not only do we need to fear God, but we also have to hope. We have to hope in God's promises. We need to know what God has promised to us. And we need to believe that He is capable and loving enough to keep those promises. We also, if we're going to follow God's way, we also have to obey. We need to know what God has instructed us to do, and we need to do it. And the bottom line of obedience here is loving God and loving people. Jesus said that is how we keep the law and the prophets, when we love God and love those around us. And to follow God's way, we need to speak the truth. What comes out of our mouths needs to be what God wants us to be talking about. It needs to be helpful and encouraging and loving and true. We need to speak God's truth. So to live well in God's world requires us to follow God's way. We need to follow the way that God has laid out for us. That's where we see and find the guidance that we need for life. So the bottom line is God's people live with wisdom when we follow God's way of life. And our challenge this week is to obey Jesus. What is Jesus asking you to do? Is it to forgive somebody? Is it to help somebody? Is it to give, to be generous? Is it to encourage someone? Is it to confess some sin? What is it that Jesus is asking you to do? And go and do it. Obey Jesus. Hey, thanks for joining us today. And if you want to find out more about living with wisdom and living well within God's world, I invite you to join us on Sunday mornings at 10:30 next to Ellis Middle School here in Austin, or on Facebook or here on YouTube for our live stream. I encourage you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to know more about Bethlehem Church, follow us on Facebook. If you need some prayer, I'd love to be praying for you. Send me a message and I will add you to my list. Have a wonderful day and God bless.